Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co host, Aiden McCrone. And yeah, Aiden, as I was saying, like right before the show, something positive to talk about tonight with Michigan State basketball. A couple back-to-back wins for the Spartans on the hardwood. We're going to get into all of that tonight with the win over number 10 Illinois, and then picking up a road win against Penn State. Have they finally turned a corner? Is this finally the start of an ascent for Michigan State as we kind of get into tournament time? We're going to get into all of that tonight, and then we'll also talk about we'll talk about tournament time a little bit, get into the Big Ten tournament, where the seeding is right now, where Michigan State could get to, and the benefits of that, and we'll go through those things tonight as well, and then we'll wrap up with some Big Ten football win totals that were released by FanDuel this week. We'll talk about where Michigan State's at, where the rest of the Big Ten's at, and our thoughts on all that. So with that, let's and get right into it. As I said, Michigan State takes down number 10 Illinois. Big time road home win for the Spartans. Needed it to be put on the NCAA tournament resume. In my opinion, like this was the win that kind of cements their place. Not to say that they could lose all the rest of their games and not make it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's what I'm talking about with that. It's a big time resume booster, and in my opinion, gets them over the hump. And then, Penn State, not the best of teams, lower Big Ten team, but at the same time, Michigan State has struggled so much away from the Breslin Center outside of the state of Michigan that this is kind of maybe a confidence booster for the program. So, or for this team. So, Aiden, let's talk about it. Let's start with Illinois, and then we'll work our way into Penn State. So, give me your thoughts on that win and how important it was.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say overall first, I hate the fact that every time Michigan State drops, a game to a kind of mid-level team, and everyone in the fan base has to go nuts and say how bad they are and pull up receipts of
Yeah,
from players or coaches about, something about them. And then MSU finally wakes up and they play to the best of their ability. And it's like, do we have to do this every time to get them to play like that
sure.
night in, night out? So I think that's just frustrating. Um, because it's like last podcast, it's like a lot of scrutiny. Like, is this team gonna even make the tournament? And then and then they go and turn it over, and they win two big games, two must-win games.
Sure.
Um, the next week. So it's like it is a little exhausting in that sense. But yeah, I think the Illinois game, you saw a complete game from AJ Hogard. You
Yeah.
saw a complete game from Malik Hall. That's huge. I thought I know they gave up 80 points, but I thought they played pretty good defense as well. Illinois is a high scoring team. So I think that they played a complete game. And then the Penn State game, like you mentioned, Akins plays really well in the first half, and then seemed like he lost his touch a little bit in the second half, but it didn't matter because they got help from everywhere. I mean, Carson Cooper gave 8 points in the first half, I think.
Right.
Sissoko did well. Malik Hall, played well on both ends of the floor. I know people will look at the scoring, but he looked physical when he was in the post, going up for rebounds and everything like that. So I think that's huge. I think we've talked about this, and you've kind of mentioned this a little bit more than I have, but Malik Hall's consistency is really
Yeah.
something that we should applaud, because I think that was the biggest question, not only coming into the season, but I think that was the biggest question even on January. Like,
Sure.
so I think that's huge that he's back and kind of being, playing at this consistent level. Because Tyson, you know, while he hasn't like taken an entire step back, he's not averaging, the 20 points per game that he was earlier this season. And I think, you know, it's much needed though. I think, the help that he's getting now is showing how this team is starting to grow, but again, there needs to be a lot more growing before they get to March as well.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple of reactions to what you had to say. Yeah, 80 gave up 80 points against Illinois, but that's a tough offense to defend.
Mhm.
They are really good in transition. Michigan State actually outplayed them in transition, which I thought was a huge key to that game. Did a really good job of getting back on defense and not letting Illinois get too many easy buckets. I think they were held to single digits in the fast break department, where Michigan State was up in the teens, maybe even approaching 20 in fast break points. So that was a huge key. They struggled with Coleman Hawkins there, particularly in the second half with
Yeah.
his post ups. There was a kind of a phantom double where the guy wasn't. I'm thinking of Carson Cooper and some of the other guys in the post. Like wasn't sure, do I double him or do I stay in the passing lane, and you end up in the middle, and then he's picking them apart with some passing there. They figured that out. Carson actually did a good job once he was matched up with Coleman of shutting that down and being able to defend him one-on-one. So just a lot of little things. And then you mentioned, AJ Hogarth finally kind of breaks out of his funk and has a complete game. You mentioned Malik Hall, who's been great. And yeah, I think getting more production from more guys now consistently, as opposed to just Tyson having to save the day night in and night out. I mentioned that in one of my two recap articles of these games. Is like, it was nice to see Michigan State have. I think it was the Penn State one, because he doesn't score in the first half. Michigan State still has 42 at halftime,
Mhm.
and it took so much of the load off of him. Now, granted, yes, Penn State not a great team, but we talked about those home and road splits. I think going into that game, Michigan State was 1-2 in neutral site games, and they were 1-5 in road games, like true road games. And so that's 2-7. And oh, by the way, that one neutral site win was in Detroit. So that's almost a home game, right there. And so, like, outside of the state of Michigan, 1-7 on the road. So yes, it's a team that Michigan State absolutely should beat. It's a team you beat by 30 at home. But they went in there and took care of business. There was some things like defensive breakdowns for sure in the second half, still giving up too many open threes. But at the same time, Penn State was taking a lot of them too. And so
Yeah.
there's a balance there. Like, you're going to throw some in eventually. You take enough shots. So not a poor defensive effort. Some things to tighten up for sure. But yeah, just a totally different um, reaction. You think about the Minnesota game where yes, it's in the middle of the game, but Tyson Walker kind of gets hurt and he's out of the game for 3-4 minutes, and the wheels fell off. And then you compare that to what happened last night with Penn State, where Tyson's not scoring, not getting open looks. He seemed to be hampered a little bit by that nagging groin injury that he's dealing with. And because of Malik Hall, because of Jaden Akins getting red hot to start the game, you're able to find a way to get a sizable lead and then hang on to it for the rest of the night. So some positive trends here.
Mhm.
Looking ahead, we'll get into that a little bit later, but I want to dial in a little bit more on these games. Let's talk about Jaden Akins a little bit, because I think this is kind of an important thing. We talked about, and I know this was a big thing for you, especially early this season, how he has this knack of disappearing. And he did that a
Mhm.
little bit to some extent in the second half, but I got to believe that the number one goal for Penn State at halftime had to be, hey, we can't let Jaden Akins get any more open looks. He killed him early, hit his first 4 3-pointers, 16 points in the first half. So he had to be number one on the halftime adjustment list. And so I give him a little bit of a break for the second half. Still scored 4 points. But just looking back at his last several games, he had 20 points, 3 rebounds against Penn State, 10 points, 6 rebounds against Illinois, 16 against Minnesota, 7 against Maryland, a little more of a quiet night, 3 of 11, didn't shoot the ball great, but got a lot of shots, 23 against Michigan, 10 against Wisconsin. So over these last 6 games, the thing I'm really looking at, though, is field goal attempts, 17 shot attempts against Penn State, 7 shot attempts against Illinois, 11 against Minnesota, 11 against Maryland, 13 against Michigan. That's what I like to see, because your kind of point early in the year was he's not getting used enough. And so I
Mhm.
think lately we've seen more shot attempts, and I like that for Michigan State's offense.
Yeah, and I still kind of feel like he's starting to get those shots like you mentioned, but it still feels like there's a little bit missing. I think the way that they use him, I don't know. I don't know if it's really a fit. He does it well. He's been, a good spot up shooter, which is what he's done, and then he's been, really good in transition, which is due to his athleticism. But I still think like there should be better ways to get him the ball. I think the fact that he's not taking a lot, like he's not dribbling the ball almost at all. Like it's
Right.
almost like he's like a Clay Thompson kind of like
A little
spot
bit.
up
Yeah.
shooter, where it's like this dude, out besides Cohen Carr, he's your most athletic player, and he's just a spot up shooter. So I kind of feel a little a bit of like mixed feelings about that still. But yeah, the fact that he's getting those shots are important because he has proven to be Michigan State's best shooter. I mean, he was 4 for 4 from three in the first half. And
Right.
then, or he might have, I think he was four, I think he ended up 4 or 5 because he had kind of had a heat check there at the end. But yeah, I mean, he's their best shooter, but I still think uh there's ways to use him and kind of off the dribble and um kind of roles like that because I do think Walker is pretty good off ball. So I think if you go to a lineup with, Akins and Walker with Hogard, if Hogard's on the bench or, Holloman can play off the ball, I still think there's ways that Akins can be used to, create his own shot also. So yeah, I mean, I thought Akins, has done really well. He's come a long way, since his freshman year and kind of found his role and carved that out um, to a really high level at this point. And I do kind of want to mention, we can talk about this, but the freshmen, I think,
Yeah.
like Xavier Booker came in for all of it felt like 45 seconds and gave 5 points. 2 for 2. Oh, I think we lost Matthew there. But yeah, Xavier Booker came in 5 points after not seeing the court the last I think it was 2 games. And so it's kind of good to see Booker out there even in the limited time that he has. It's good to see him be successful. I think, it's pretty clear now, in the limited minutes that we've seen, it's kind of on the defensive side of the ball, more so the physicality, and also the rebounding. I see that, but I still think there's ways to get him on the floor as well because I do think, while he is struggling with that, you have those same concerns with, Jackson Cole or, Madi Sissoko and Cooper both can go cold and be, less physical than they have been. So I still think there's ways to get Booker on the court. Carr's done well. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about the freshmen as well and kind of what they've done or not done in the last, I guess we can say like the last 4 games too.
Sure. Yeah, that's on my to-dos list tonight. One quick note about Akins to kind of wrap that up.
Mhm.
I agree with you. I think there's more you can do with him in the half court. Would like to see him a little bit more as a slasher, maybe. And I think I've seen him attack off the dribble a little bit more, maybe over the last couple of um, weeks. But can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. Well, my video feed, I can't tell if my video feed's working or not. But so um, he's attacking off the dribble a little bit more lately, but I don't. I think they can do more. I do like the fact that they've gotten him in transition a little bit more in recent. Uh,
Oh, I guess we lost Matt for a second time talking about Akins. Unless we get him back again. Nope, we lost him. Yeah, so I mean, I can wrap up about kind of the Illinois and Penn State game while we're waiting for Matt to come back in. But I think just the fact that they're playing complete is really important. Just you know, we've had our concerns about Hogard and what he can and can't do, and I think the last two games he's really turned that. The turnovers are at a minimum, which is almost unheard of because it feels like every year since Izzo came to MSU, since Izzo was the head coach at MSU, we've had concerns about turnovers.
For sure.
But yeah, it's going low. So yeah, you can continue with what you were talking about
Yeah, no,
Akins.
I'll wrap it up. Like I agree with you. I think there's more you can do with Akins in the half court. I like the fact that they're getting him some more looks in transition recently. Would like to see that continue. Let's move on to the freshman now, because this is kind of something that was in my mind even as I'm watching kind of the second half play out against Penn State. Xavier Booker comes in and has a nice little 4 minute stint. We've said that a lot, like over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, nice little 3 minute, 4 minute stint. Scored 5 points, knocks down a three. A nice little pick and roll where he kind of scored through traffic a little bit. And then Cohen didn't get as much of an opportunity. He got chewed out a couple times by Izzo. I think that was a defensive thing, maybe being out of position a little bit, but just something that I noticed watching the game. Here's where I'm at, I guess, at this point with the freshman. We've talked about this subject a lot. I just don't think it's going to change. I just don't like. I don't think we're going to see more of a bigger role. I wrote about this a little bit in my recap of Penn State. Booker did good things, liked what I saw, but I just don't think Tom Izzo trusts these guys in the second half of games when things get. And even last night was not even that tight. Now you give Penn State some credit. They hit enough shots to stick around and not let what happened in East Lansing happen again in Happy Valley, where Michigan State won by 30 at home. So give them some credit for hitting some shots. A few defensive breakdowns, as we mentioned, with Michigan State, but nothing too egregious. And so maybe that's why Booker and Carr don't get much run in the second half. But I just don't think that's going to change this season. As much as Izzo keeps saying, "Oh yeah, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming," I'll believe it when I see it, because the proof is in the pudding at this point. And that's kind of all I have to say about it at this point. Like, if you've got more, go ahead and share more. But that's where
No,
I'm at.
I agree. I think they've played well and they've shown kind of who they are and what they what their strengths are and kind of what they lack and need to improve. And I think there's ways to find them on the court, but yeah, like you said, I don't see anything changing because we are over halfway through February now, so it's
Right.
not looking too yeah, it's not gonna look too much different once we hit March.
Right. And I like what I saw this a lot on Twitter as the game's going on. I do think uh, Xavier Booker opens up more options for Michigan State on offense. I think he's ready to go offensively.
Mhm.
But we know Izzo's mindset. It's defense, rebound, and run. Um, and I just don't know that he trusts Booker to do those first two things, defend and rebound. Not that this is a great rebounding team anyway, but it's just in Izzo's DNA that has to be uh, established before you can start getting regular minutes. And I just don't know that's going to happen this year. Um, let's finish this segment with Malik Hall. We won't spend a ton of time here because we've talked about this quite a bit already. And then we'll move into kind of looking ahead to what's next for Michigan State and talk Big Ten tournament seeding a little bit to kind of wrap up basketball. But Malik Hall, I'll just kind of throw the question at you this way. We know first 4 years of his career and even really the first half of this season, um, early in his career, the injuries. He would play well, and then he had some kind of got hurt, and so he had to kind of recover from that. And a few times this happens throughout his career. Um, every once in a while, he would pop off and have one of these games that we've kind of seen consistently. Now he had one of those, and then it's like, oh, he disappears for 2 or 3 games, and so the book was kind of written on Malik Hall coming into this season was, yeah, he's a solid player, but can't do it consistently. Hasn't done it consistently. Um, and so I even remember going all the way back to coming into the year, wondering if Malik Hall is going to hang on to his starting job. Like that's kind of where my head was at just coming into the year, because top 5 recruiting class, all of that stuff. So my question is this: it's been 13, 14 games now where Malik Hall has been really, really good, and yeah, there was 2 clunkers in there. There was the Northwestern game was the real clunker.
Right.
Minnesota, he just missed 5 free throws. Like that's kind of where I wouldn't even call that one a clunker. It was just a bad night at the free throw line, ends up with 6 points. But like that's going to happen for college players. Like that's just with the up and down nature of the sport. You're going to have off nights. Those are just off nights at this point. What he's done over these last 13 games, has he kind of like rewritten the history book or his own book on how he'll be remembered at Michigan State with what he's done over these last 13 games?
I think that's up to the tournament, in all honesty. I think,
That's fair.
I think the tournament is really gonna define not only his career, but I think, the careers of, Walker and Hogard as well. Um, and that upper class. So yeah, I mean, I think there's something that you can build off of right now. And I think it's, continuing to build off that. But yeah, I mean, he's been as physical as he's ever been, which is huge for, the tournament because I mean, if let's be honest, we're gonna see Michigan State probably in, you know, I don't even know if I would put them as a 7 seed right now, but I would still say, if they keep, winning, maybe if they knock off Purdue in the Big Ten tournament, or if they manage to win at Mackey, I think, maybe you could see them in the as a 7 seed. But I think, yeah, we're looking at that 7 to 10 range, which, the 1 to 2 seed, the ones and two seeds vary because you could be
Right.
in, a region with UConn, who is kind of has a lot of size and is just really good. And then, you could be in a region with Houston, right? So, and Houston's going to play small ball and they're going to, run it up and down the court and play, really good defense. So, it, when he plays at his best, he's suited for any kind of style, right? So like, yeah, like I said, like a Yukon or a Kansas team versus, like a Houston team, like he's suited to, play against any of those styles. So it's
Sure.
really important he's got to be at his best for that because um yeah, and just stay out of foul trouble, which he's done.
Hmm.
Which is another thing to commend him on. And yeah, I think, the scoring is the big thing, but I think everything else, just those little details. Um, I don't know what sparked this. I'd like to imagine it'd be a conversation between him and Izzo. And I would definitely like to be a fly on the wall listening to that. But yeah, like you mentioned, he outside of really the Northwestern game and a bad night at the line against Minnesota, he's played really well. And you mentioned this, a month ago. It was his most consistent kind of 6 7 game streak of his
Right.
career, and now he's built on that to about, I don't even know what we're at now, probably about
10,
12
11.
games. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So, again, a couple thoughts. I just wonder, if maybe he is fully healthy now. Because I remember like going back to the beginning of this year, when he would take a shot outside of like 15 feet, it was so clunky and not fluid at all. And his shooting form is still a little funky, but he just didn't look comfortable at all. Even that shot at the end of the Minnesota game was a little bit like that. Um, but I just think it took him a while to get back into some rhythm
mhm.
after uh, after last season, which was he was plagued with injuries last year. And so I just wonder if he's finally healthy again. And we're kind of seeing the results of that on top of the fact that this is his 5th year and he's played a lot of basketball at this point. And man, last night though, like he was a man on a mission. I think I wrote that in the piece as well.
Mhm.
Just like the determination Had the mid range really working. He has that pretty much all year, especially over these last couple of weeks. Um, and yeah, just really enjoyed watching him play. It's fun for me. Like it's a little bit of a throwback to see a power forward who can do some of the things that he does. The mid range jumper, the way he attacks the rim and finishes through contact. I've enjoyed watching it. So yeah, really excited for him. I do think I've seen this on. I'm not taking credit for this because I've seen it on socials already, but like he's had a little bit of a Joey Hauser esque redemption arc this
Mhm.
season, which is great to see because I was happy for Joey when it happened for him, and it's good to see it for Malik. But I think you're right though. Like it's going to come down to tournament time and what this team does in March. And that's what we're all remembered, or not all of us, but like that's what all these teams are
Yeah.
remembered for is what they do in March. So that will be the key. And again, to your point, matchups are the key in tournament time. It's all about the matchups you draw, and that's what makes it so fun is because with the upsets and all the things that happen, like you never know who you're going to play next, and that's what makes it great. Nathan, good to see you in the comments. Welcome. As always, audience, go ahead and throw some comments in the comment section. We'll address any questions or anything that you've got in there. Good to see Keys to Wisdom back again. All right, let's look ahead a little bit now towards this upcoming weekend and week for Michigan State and get into the Big Ten seeding a little bit. So up next, you go to Ann Arbor. You play one of the worst Michigan teams I've seen in
Mhm.
15 years or something like that. It's a game you've got to win. Michigan State has not won in Ann Arbor, I want to say, in 3 or 4 years. So this is an opportunity to kind of end that streak in Chrysler where you haven't been able to get it done there. No better opportunity than against this team who has really struggled all season. That's a game you should win. Then you come back home, you get Iowa. Iowa is not what they've been in recent years. Not a bad team, but they're 14-11, 6-8 in conference play. Again, at home, a game that you should win, and then you've got Ohio State after that, who's just above Michigan in the Big Ten standings. So three very winnable games. For Michigan State, this is the time to really lock down and not let one of these slip. If you do that, let's talk about seeding a little bit. Right now, Michigan State is in fifth place in the Big Ten. They're a half
Mhm.
game behind Northwestern. Northwestern just lost one of their key players. Name is escaping me at the moment. But you've got an opportunity to get in that top four, which is important because you get a double bye in the Big Ten tournament if you are in that top four. So let's talk about this upcoming week and where do you see Michigan State maybe ultimately ending up when in that standings as we kind of wind things down here.
Yeah, I think it's gonna come up or come down to, the Northwestern game itself, when we see it in March. But yeah, like you mentioned, if you drop one of those games, I think you can kiss that 4 seed goodbye. You're kind of in the 5 to 8 slot, looking at getting one bye game, or yeah, one bye, and then um, yeah, and you're missing out on a double bye, which is important, especially for someone like Tyson Walker, who looks like he's been playing hurt.
Yeah,
He's
I agree.
gotten knocked. He's gotten knocked, the past few games, and I think this stretch as well. If there's a time to rest him or to play him less, it would, it's this time. And the Penn State game, they were kind of in an arm's reach the whole game. But if you go play Michigan, your goal is to really knock them out of the park and get up
Yeah,
early, let Tyson kind of sit for a while, and let Holloman take some minutes. He's going to be important come March as well, so that's something to look at. So yeah, I think dropping any of these games would be um bad. It'd just be bad,
right.
not only for Big Ten seeding, but for tournament resume as well. Because we can't guarantee they're going to win the Big Ten tournament, and if they drop a game like Michigan or Ohio State, that is gonna negatively affect their resume.
Right.
So I think, yeah, but I mean, Michigan outside of the Wisconsin game, which they randomly won, it kind of feels like a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
But uh, but yeah, you gotta kind of end them. And then, Iowa, like you said, it is a similar Iowa team to past years. I think the thing with them is like they're young. I think they got a pretty young squad. Um, and then with Ohio State, yeah, they're kind of all over the place. They got two good players and they're kind of figuring it out. And then especially with Chris Holtman getting fired,
Right.
that's really something you have to take advantage of because yeah, so I mean you're playing the worst team in the Big Ten on the road. You have Iowa at home, and then you go to Ohio State, who just fired their coach. So it's I think every game for the rest of the season is a must-win game, but I think these are not only must-win games, but just make sure you don't drop these by any means. I think if a Purdue loss isn't the end of the world. I think a Northwestern loss isn't the end of the world, but one of these could really affect your tournament resume.
Yeah, so just looking ahead of Northwestern. So as I mentioned, they're a half game behind Northwestern. They're only one game back of Wisconsin, but Wisconsin has the I don't know if it came down to a tie. I would imagine Wisconsin would be ahead of North Michigan
Hmm.
State in the seed line because they beat Michigan State twice, and then you're a game and a half behind Illinois. So the things go the right way here. Even if you lose to Purdue and you win the other 6 games on your schedule, I think it's 6. Um, you could potentially, with a couple of Illinois losses, get all the way to the 2 line. I don't think that's very likely, but again, you want to get in that top 4, get that double bye, and then you kind of see where the rest of the conference lines up and you make a run at a Big Ten tournament championship. So, lot to come with that. Looking forward to it. Is there anything else that was on my list? Oh, this is kind of just a note. I thought about it while you were talking about Michigan and especially Ohio State. Michigan State did pick up another quad 1 win and a quad 2 win. That's because Maryland is now rated number 75 in net. I don't pretend to know all of the insides and outs when it comes to quad
Yeah.
1 and quad 2 and all that. It's I've never been very interested by it other than, oh yeah, this is their resume.
Hmm.
But that does help. That helps Michigan State's resume. Um, Probably would result in them, getting a boost with their seed line for the NCAA tournament. Um, they have no quad 3 or quad 4 losses. Again, this is not something that I know inherently, but I think a loss to Michigan or on the road, and they do get Ohio State at home. So losing either one of those, I would imagine would have to be a quad 3 loss. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
wrong on that, but it feels like it should be. If it's
Yeah.
not, I don't know how the whole thing works. But just want to throw that out there for those who are tracking the resume thing. Um, and yeah, I think that's all we have for basketball. Unless you have anything else to add, Aiden.
I mean, I think the only other thing that I can think of that we didn't touch on is MSU got invited to Maui for next year, and that's
Okay,
that's
I
really
didn't
all I can
hadn't
think
seen
about.
that.
Yeah, so MSU is going back to the Maui Invitational next season. So
All right, well,
but that's all I have.
yeah, we're looking forward to that next year.
Yeah.
So with that, let's talk a little bit football now to end the show, and then we'll kind of get out of here and let you guys have the rest of your evening. Um, yeah, so FanDuel released Big Ten football expected win totals for next year. Um, and I always like looking at these type of things. I like looking at schedules, even in winter, looking ahead who's going to beat who, like who has a better line for reaching the Big Ten championship. Just because there's so many teams now in the Big Ten. Schedules is gonna factor in a lot about who ends up getting to Indianapolis. They take the top 2 teams now, and then an expanded playoff, and so there's 12 playoff spots now. But kind of reeling it back in here, Michigan State expected win set at 5.5 here as we approach spring practice. There's another transfer portal window after spring practice, and so that will be something that we keep an eye on. So still some roster change is possible after spring ball. We saw that last year when Peyton Thorne and Keon Coleman left the program after spring practice, which was a new thing for Michigan State to experience anyway. And obviously two key guys going into last year, and we won't talk about last year, but the point I wanted to make though was 5.5 was the same number as last year. 5.5 was the expected win total last year. It's the same this year. Big Ten gets a little tougher. So your reaction to that specifically, Aiden, that new regime, a lot of excitement around Jonathan Smith, but Vegas is pretty much telling you don't get too excited.
I don't know. I think part of me, I mean, I think all of me wants to take the over, like hammer the over. I think there's definitely, 7, 8 wins on this schedule, but
I agree.
yeah, I mean, I think, Vegas will definitely take you down to earth a little bit.
They will.
Because they are right a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time they are right, or if they're not right, they're close. So I would still take the over though. I think there's definitely 6 winnable games. But yeah, like you mentioned, I think, spring window, I think there's going to be some more outgoing than incoming transfers in spring. I think they loaded up that roster with a lot of, high school recruits, and they did pretty well in the transfer portal. I think they're really confident with the guys that they brought in, and, a lot of quality transfers, not only from Oregon State, but, from everywhere. So I think, that's a good staff. I think the biggest thing will be what the defense is going to look like. I think that's going to be a big question for people coming up in the fall, because it is, a defense that, MSU people aren't really accustomed to. It's not considered kind of like the smash mouth Big Ten old school kind of stuff. It's a little more nuanced. Um, so yeah, I think that's something interesting. But yeah, I would definitely still take the over. I think, you got your non-conference with it's not Louisiana anymore. It's Florida Atlantic. Prairie View A&M, I think, is the other game they picked up, and then I think Boston College is very winnable. They add they add a new head coach with Bill O'Brien, and then you have you know, I think Maryland week 2 is that's a tough game. I think Maryland does really well early.
Right.
And then you still have teams like Indiana, and I think they play Purdue, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Purdue is second to last game.
Yeah, and then you still have I think Iowa's a winnable game still that you get at home.
Mm-hmm.
You get some very winnable games. And I mean I think Michigan's a wild card. I think
I
they're
agree.
they're gonna retain enough to be good, but I just don't know how good they're gonna be. But yeah, I think if I get that game is going to be on the road, so that'll make it tougher. But regardless, even without Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon, and Penn State as well. I think there's still 8 winnable games. You take away Maryland, that's probably 7. And if they drop one to Iowa or Nebraska, then you're down to 6. So I think, yeah, but I still think they can get there. The staff has put a good enough roster. I think there was a good enough roster last year that they could have won 6 games, and they just couldn't do it. So yeah, that's kind of all I got.
Yeah. Eggplant just wanted to address Florida Atlantic went 6-6 last year, and they're coached by Tom Herman, which is kind of interesting. So I think it's his second year in the program. So I don't know. Again, I'm not following Florida Atlantic too closely. I know that because I did a story recently about Michigan State facing multiple first year head coaches at their new places, and then a couple of guys who are entering their second year as well. So that's why I know this about Florida Atlantic. But I don't know how they've recruited. Tom Herman, once upon a time, was a very hot up and coming head coach. Did very well at Houston. Goes to Texas. Was I think average. Is that fair to say? Tom Herman was
Yeah.
average at Texas,
Yeah.
but it wasn't good enough at Texas,
Right.
and so he gets fired. So a good coach, but again, would expect. I expect Michigan State to win that game. Would be a real bummer to open the season with a loss to Florida Atlantic. To your point about the schedule, I'm with you. Like I'm leaning towards the over. Going into last year, I was a little bit more on the fence. I know pretty distinctly I was kind of it was 5.5, and I was like I was somewhere in between 5 and 6, and
Hmm.
so I thought the line was right on. I was a little bit surprised when I saw this line at 5.5. I would have expected it to be maybe 6.5. Just
Hmm.
with the way I've looked at the schedule, for all the talk about the expansion of the Big Ten and how much tougher it's going to be, long term, absolutely that's true. But when I saw Michigan State's kind of first schedule with this expanded Big Ten, I kind of thought they got a bit of a break. They don't actually play Penn State this year. They're not on the schedule.
Oh yeah.
And so you've got Michigan, you've got Ohio State, you've got Oregon. Those are your big time games. I agree with you about Michigan. Still going to be good. Still enough talent on that roster, but don't know what they're going to look like the first year after Jim Harbaugh and all of the losses defensively with their coaching staff. So we'll see what they look like. But like I think we can say at this point, probably safe to assume. Let's just assume Michigan State loses those 3 games. Um, Again, at Maryland is tough. Week 2, you mentioned that one. You've got Florida Atlantic, Prairie View A&M. Boston College just hired Bill O'Brien. Make of that what you will. Uh, so I would say the kind of the swing games, in my opinion, would be at Maryland.
Yeah.
Throw Iowa in there.
Hmm.
At Illinois is an interesting one to me. Rutgers at the end of the year. Rutgers is better than they've been certainly before Greg Schiano got there. So those are kind of my swing games when I look at the schedule. Rutgers, Illinois, Iowa, and Maryland. Games I think you should win. Florida Atlantic, Prairie View for sure. I like the I don't know, like Boston College. I just feel like even though it's on the road, it's a Power Five team. I like Michigan State's chances there.
Hmm.
And then Purdue. I'm not sold on Ryan Walter, so I'm up to 4 games that I look at right away and I say, yep, I think Michigan State should win those games. And then you've got 4 swing games, and so that's kind of going to determine that. Um, but I agree with you. I think what my initial reaction was when I saw 5.5, I was like, I think I would go the over right now.
Yeah.
My concern is this, and it's a similar concern. And I think you brought up the defense. That's for sure, probably at the top of the list, because that's just something that never got right under Mel Tucker for all of his expertise as a defensive guy, having coached under Kirby Smart, having coached under Nick Saban, just couldn't get that right. And I
Hmm.
think Scotty Hazelton had a big deal or a big part of to do with that. Um, my concern is still the offensive line. That's not something that gets fixed overnight.
Hmm.
Michigan State's offensive line, in comparison to the rest of the Big Ten, uh, below average. I think that's fair to say. I really like. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Jim McCalzick is the guy who they brought over from Oregon State. He's got a good track record. I think over time he's going to do really good work for Michigan State at offensive line. But year one, I'm not sure what that looks like. So that's still my concern. And we'll see what plays out. We'll probably revisit this again once we go through spring ball and kind of get that just get a sense of what the program looks like under Jonathan Smith for the first time. I'm really looking forward to it. Um, let's talk. Do you have anything to add about Michigan State before we move on to like kind of the rest of the conference?
Um, no, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks. I think spring will maybe give us an idea, but then again, last spring we felt pretty confident that there was a step in the right direction offensively, and it didn't look that way in the fall. So I guess, yeah, I guess I'll wait till wait till spring to give my thoughts, and then we'll see what happens in August.
For sure. Let me get your thoughts on this real quick, because I wrote this story. How it kind of played out was I was going to write a story once Bill O'Brien was hired by Boston College, and it was just going to be, hey, one of Michigan State's scheduled opponents has a new head coach. I waited, it kind of got lost in the shuffle, didn't do it right away. And so then like the news was out for 3 or 4 days. I was like, well, I'm not going to do it now. But one thing I did look at was the fact that Michigan State has 3 opponents who will have first year head coaches at their school. Bill O'Brien's one of them. Sharon Moore is a second. And the third one is Kurt Signetti at Indiana, who comes over from James Madison. So those are 3 first year, 10-year head coaches there. And then there's 3 others who are going into their second year. Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic, Prairie View A&M's coach. Apologize, I don't remember his name because it was Prairie View, so I don't remember his name, but he's a second-year guy. And then the third one was Ryan Walters at Purdue. So we'll go through this kind of quickly, but given the timing of the hires between Michigan State, which was very early in the coaching cycle, and then Boston College, which was at the tail end of the coaching cycle, I give and just comparing Bill O'Brien to Jonathan Smith, I give Michigan State an edge there. I think in coaching staff across the board. Do you agree with that? Am I on the right page there?
Yeah, 100%. I think we saw this in 2020. Mark D'Antonio retires, I think, one day
Right.
before National Signing Day, and while kind of COVID happened, and it was kind of all of a blur at this point now. But Mel Tucker had to kind of make a makeshift staff on the fly in February. So we've seen that before. We kind of know what that's like. He did get some guys that he really wanted. Like he got, Courtney Hawkins. He went and got Scotty Hazelton. Um, but yeah, I think, we maybe if Tucker got hired in December, we'd see a different staff. So I think there's some to that. But yeah, so we've seen it before, and we saw how they struggled in 2020. So yeah, that's tough for any program. I think
Right.
UCLA is going to go through that too. They
Right.
hired
Yeah, I
with
forgot about UCLA.
yeah, so UCLA and Oregon State both hired within, so that might, and Michigan as well. So they might retain more guys than bringing in a brand new face. But at the same time, that everything changes, right? Like the roles of the coaches, shuffling the chairs. So that definitely gives MSU an advantage because you know we've seen kind of videos online from the football media team of the strength and conditioning program that's in right now before spring practice. So those are the little things that maybe some people don't think about, but that's really goes a long way. And that's kind of where a lot of success comes from, is a lot of the off season.
For sure. And so, yeah, we're on the same page. I think Michigan State has a big advantage because of just the timing of their coaching search and all of that over a Boston College. I think the advantage over Indiana is just the amount of investment for Michigan State in
Hmm.
football is way higher than it is for Indiana. So I'm thinking about like assistant coaches' salaries. Jonathan Smith had a much larger pool from than Kurt Signetti at Indiana. And then a similar thing with these other programs with Florida Atlantic. Tom Herman, I think he's a good coach. I think he's a solid coach.
Hmm.
Don't know anything about his staff, but again, due to investment, the amount of money that Michigan State puts into football, I would imagine again a coaching edge there. Prairie View, don't have to spend a whole lot of time there. I think Purdue is a little bit interesting, but the thing I just completely lean on is if you offer me Jonathan Smith or Ryan Walters, I'm taking Jonathan Smith every time. He's a guy who's had 6 years of head coaching experience as opposed to one for Ryan Walters. I remember it was tough on Purdue losing Jeff Brom, because Jeff Brom kind of made Purdue football relevant again. They didn't they won the Big Ten West one year. And there's a limit to what you can do at Purdue, but like I remember Purdue was awful before he got there, and so it's a tough loss. And when they hired Ryan Walters, I immediately didn't like it for whatever reason. Didn't know a whole lot about Ryan Walters. I think mostly just because you're going from Jeff Brom, who was an offensive guy, and then to completely flip and go with Illinois' defensive coordinator was a weird move to me. Um, the point I'm making or going towards is I really think when it comes to these coaching staff, it comes down to like Michigan State and Michigan. I think I would argue that Michigan State might have a better coaching staff than Michigan does right now, just with everything that Michigan lost. The entire defensive side of the football. Jesse Minter's gone. Mike Elston, the defensive line coach, is gone. They lost Chris Partridge in the middle of the sign stealing scandal. That happened like because he apparently talked to some players about the investigation. It wasn't supposed to, and so he gets canned. And then the secondary coach, Steve Klingsdale, who was a really good recruiter in the Midwest, especially he was at Kentucky before Michigan. That's a big loss for them. Offensive side of the ball, more guys getting promoted from within. But like, am I crazy to say or to suggest that Michigan State has a better coaching staff right now than Michigan does?
I don't think you're crazy. I mean, when you think about it, I think, Michigan definitely lost a lot. I mean,
Sure.
with both of the coaching turnovers, I think, Michigan definitely lost a lot more than what MSU lost with the coaching turnover. I mean, you also met, there's also Mike Elston, who a lot of people,
Right.
regarded him as the best defensive line coach in the country. And you lose him. So, and the guys you mentioned, right? That's huge. But yeah, yeah, coaching wise, I think that's going to be a huge. I think MSU is definitely. Uh, there's an argument to be had that MSU is at an advantage right now. But I think there's something to having Sharon Moore there. The fact that he was the head coach for what 4 games or 5 games throughout the season. Um, there's something to be said about that, which is,
Sure.
um, you know, and again that he's a familiar face, so that also helps. But yeah, I think the staff as a whole, I think, Smith has a lot of connections that he's made, and I think Sharon Moore has done a really good job as an OC, and I think he's done a really good job at an interim, but I don't think he has the connections that Jonathan Smith has had, and I think that
Sure.
part of that's due to age, um, but yeah, I think that gives Smith an advantage like that because you can go and grab, the running backs coach, um, Keith Bafana. I can't remember his. Yeah, I think that's how you say his last name. He was with Smith at Washington, and you have guys like Brian Lindgren, the offensive coordinator, who's been with Smith since he was at, I think it was Idaho. So, um, and then you go find, a Joe Rossi, who you've never coached with, but he's got the connections there to bring a guy like him in. So I think the connections definitely help a lot, and I think that's going to be something that Michigan has to, that's something that Sharon Moore's gotta figure out. And as a head coach, it's a lot different. And while he's been an interim, he's never had to make, a big time hire for a coordinator job. And he's got to go out and do that now. So I think, yeah, like you said, there, that experience level, I think gives Michigan State an advantage right now.
Yeah, just a couple things to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll finish the show with like the rest of the Big Ten win totals. But the first thing, it's kind of ironic that Michigan hires Sharon Moore to kind of like keep things in place, and then a week and a half later, all the defensive coaches are gone. That's
Yeah.
ironic.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, and your strength and conditioning coach and Brent Herbert, who is
Right.
also a big part of the program, and so it was like, well,
Yeah, that's huge.
congratulations on keeping things together. Uh, Again, it's a bold strategy. Anyway, so there was that, and then obviously Michigan, like top to bottom, better than Michigan State's. That like nobody can argue otherwise. Michigan's roster is better, but I do believe that Michigan State's has the superior coaching staff right now, and we'll see what Michigan does in the transfer portal. But I would argue that Michigan State has a advantage at starting quarterback as well, right as where things stand right now. And so you give me the better coaching staff, the better quarterback. Who knows? That's where I'll leave that. Who knows? And with that, we will go into Big Ten win totals to get out of here and wrap up the show. Aiden, I'll just start at the bottom, and I'm going to throw you the number and just a gut reaction. Now, I don't have all their schedules in front of me, so this is kind of hard to do for some of these teams. But just that's why I said gut reaction on some of these numbers. Give me your overs and your unders, and I'll reply, and then we'll move on. We'll do this kind of quickly. All right.
All right.
All right. Minnesota's at the bottom, 4.5 wins.
I have no clue where the big. I mean, there's no Big Ten West anymore, so
Well, yeah.
I'll say over. I'll
Okay.
say over.
I don't know a whole lot about their schedule, but I've heard it's very difficult. So I'll go under. I'm thinking
Okay.
4. So just I'm throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Purdue is at the same boat, 4.5 for Purdue.
Yeah. I'll go under on that.
I'll go under as well. Indiana, first year under Kurt Signetti, they're at 5.5.
Somehow I think Kirk Signetti, from watching interviews, I'm kind of optimistic, but I'll still go under.
Yeah, I'm going to go under as well. UCLA, you talk about being a tough spot, 5.5 for them.
Yeah, I'll go under on that.
I'm also going to go under. Not that I was like super high on Chip Kelly, but losing your coach and you mentioned it when with Mark Antonio, losing your coach at this time of the year, really, really difficult. Illinois at 5.5.
Ooh, I'll go over. I'll say over.
I'm with you. I'll go over as well. I do think Brett Bielema is a good coach. Maybe not at what he was when he had Wisconsin winning Big Ten championships, but I still think he's a good coach. So I'll go over. Northwestern was the surprise of Big Ten and perhaps the country last year. They're at 5.5 after an 8-5 win a first year under Ryan Braun. They're at 5.5. Tough schedule, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna go under on this. I think they're gonna regress.
Okay. I'll go over. I'm thinking they flirt with the bowl eligibility. I'll go 6 for them, so I'll go over. We talked about Michigan State; they're at 5.5. Rutgers is at 6.5, and they do have a favorable schedule. I know that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over for them. I think their schedule is definitely favorable.
Yep, I'm gonna go over for Rutgers as well. Wisconsin's at 6.5. That one surprised me a little bit. Don't know a whole lot about their schedule, but you just see Wisconsin in 6.5. It seems like a weird number, but
Yeah, I've checked. They do have a pretty tough schedule, but I'll still go over for that.
okay. I know they play LSU in the like first game of the
Mhm.
year, which is difficult.
They're Alabama, I think, or is it LSU? They might play Alabama next year.
No, I think you're right. I think it is Alabama early. I don't know if it's week 1. No, it's not. It's LSU plays USC. I don't know where I got that from, but you're right. It's Alabama against Wisconsin. I'm not sure if it's week 1 or not, but so Wisconsin, I'll go. I like Luke Fickell, tough schedule. I'll go over, but I don't feel great about it. Maryland's
Mhm.
at 7.5.
I'm gonna go under on this. I think MSU week 2. I think that's a bad time for MSU, but I
Hmm.
still think Maryland could, even if they win that game, go under.
Okay, I'll go. Tough. Vegas is good at what they do.
Yeah.
They usually schedule some pretty crappy non-conference games, though. So I'll go over just because they usually
Yeah.
beat up on the non-conference and get 3 wins right away there. So I'll go over. Don't feel great about it. Iowa's at
Mhm.
7.5. I know they get Cade McNamara back. They finally fired Brian Ferentz. It had to be the athletic director is actually the one who did it. It wasn't Kirk
Mhm.
Ferentz who fired. And then they hired the former head coach for Western Michigan. So
Yeah,
Iowa's at
Tim
seven and a
Lester.
half. Tim Lester, yeah, it's at 7.5
Um,
for Iowa.
yeah, I'll go over.
I'm gonna go under for Iowa.
Okay.
Nebraska's at 7.5. Dylan Raiola season.
Um, I don't think so. I'm gonna go under on that. I do think they
Okay.
have a favorable schedule though.
All right. Man, Matt Rule has had some quick turnarounds in
Mhm.
college. I'm gonna jump on the Cornhusker train here, and I'll go. Wow, I don't know, 7.5. I take it back. I think 7. I think 7's the number.
Mhm.
8 sounds like too much, so I'll go 7. I'm with you. I'm under. Washington goes from national championship runner-up to losing your head coach to Alabama. They've got Jed Fish, who we talked about a lot during Michigan State's coaching
Right.
search. The guy that we both like, but a lot of transition. They're at 7.5.
Yeah, I really like Jed Fish, but I think they lost a lot, not only from
Yes,
the
they did.
coaching staff, but roster turnover. So I'm gonna go under on that.
I'm with you. I'll go under on Washington. USC at 7.5. Some of the shine is off of the Lincoln Riley hire a little bit. The honeymoon stage is over. I'll just say that about USC. So they're at 7.5.
Yeah, definitely. I think transitioning to the Big Ten, this is a huge year for Lincoln Riley to prove whether or not he's gonna, sink or swim. So, um, yeah, I mean, they have a decently tough schedule. I know, they have a game where they they have to go to Wisconsin in October. Like,
Ooh,
how are they going to
yeah.
react to a game like that, even though Wisconsin's not who they used to be? So, um, I'm gonna go under, honestly. I think I'll
Okay.
go under on 7.5.
Hmm. I wish I had their schedule in front of me, but that would be cheating. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. You lose Caleb Williams. Lincoln Riley has talked a big game this offseason about like, yeah, we're going to be I think he said we're going to be a defense first team. I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'll go under for USC, but I don't feel I don't feel great about that. I wouldn't be surprised if they get to 8. And then at the top of the conference, you've got Penn State at 9.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the over on that. I think Penn State is gonna be a team that will make a 12-team playoff, year in, year out, and just but I'm not a fan of Penn State, but I really want to see a team like that kind of take the next step and compete, and play for a Big Ten championship.
I think it seems like Penn State has been building for 2024. Like this feels like
Hmm.
the year. Last year they were good, um, struggled offensively. I think the jury's still out. Who's the quarterback? And
Drew
I'm lost.
Aller, yeah.
Drew Aller is the quarterback. A former 5-star kid. I think there's a lot of potential there. He's got a year of starting experience under his belt now.
Mhm.
A new offensive coordinator for the multiple time under James Franklin. So we see how that plays out. They lose Manny Diaz, who's now the head coach at Duke. So some churn over there. But it does seem like that they've been building for 2024. And so I'm with you. I'm going to go over for Penn State. Michigan's at 9.5. Tough schedule.
Yeah, this is a tough one, especially with the coaching turnover as well. So I think I'm going to go under here, but I'm going to go under because it's safe. But I wouldn't be surprised if they win 10 games.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna go under for Michigan as well. Um, Texas in the non-conference is tough. They've got games against Ohio State, um, or I know they play Oregon, Washington, and USC. So that's there's a lot of tough games in there. So I'm with you. I'm gonna go under for 9.5 in Michigan. And then 2 teams at the top, same win total here. Oregon is at 10.5.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon has a very favorable schedule. I think I'll take the over on that. But yeah, again, they're kind of in that Penn State where it's like they got
Yeah.
to get over the hump and, win a big game. So I'll take the over. I think they win 11 games, but yeah, I'll be intrigued to see what Dan Lanning can do in year 3.
Do you know if Penn State and Oregon play each other?
I don't think they play each other. I think Oregon's really one tough game is Ohio State.
Okay. Yes, they get Michigan at home. Oregon gets
Mhm.
Michigan at home, and then Washington will be their annual opponent. But again, we talked about
Right.
the losses that Washington suffered, and so you would favor Oregon in that game. I want to say they get Ohio. Do they travel to Columbus or get Ohio State at home? I can't remember, but I think you were.
They have Ohio State at home. I have it
Yeah,
right
so
here.
maybe I'm off on Michigan. Maybe they have to go to Ann Arbor. But anyway, regardless, I'm with you. Oh man, I think Oregon's really good.
Mhm.
10 and like that 9 and 10, I'm right, or not 9 and 10, 10 and 11, I'm right on that
Mhm.
line. I'll go over though. I'm with you. I think Ohio State and Oregon are the two best teams in the Big Ten. Spoiler alert for our last one, which is Ohio State at 10.5. Dude, we haven't talked about this because it's not really our beat, but man, the stuff that Ohio State has done this offseason in the transfer
It's
portal,
crazy.
getting Chip Kelly to be your like in my opinion, backed their way into an upgrade on offensive coordinator. Like Bill
Mhm.
O'Brien's out the door, and in walks Chip Kelly, who has a prior relationship with Ryan Day. I think a lot of Ryan Day has built his offense around was Chip Kelly concepts. And so then you get those two guys back in the room together, and they're going to be so yeah, just a lot of big time moves for Ohio State this offseason. They're at 10.5. I'm assuming you're going to go over.
Yeah, I think, 10.5 is hard over, and if they fall anything short of a national championship, I'd say unless it's Georgia, I think if it's anyone besides Ohio State or Georgia, those two teams are really going to be kicking themselves because Michigan and Alabama are now kind of beat themselves right now with the coaching turnover. So yeah,
Right.
they have higher expectations. I'd like to believe.
Yeah, I think yeah, just what they've done. Like Caleb Downs,
Yeah,
the,
it's
the kid
yeah,
from Alabama.
and
Yeah, we'll just
Quinshawn
draft him
Judkins as well.
with
Elite, yeah,
Travion coming back. With Travion
yep,
coming back,
I know.
the only transfer portal addition that I was kind of like, was Will Howard.
Yeah,
Just because the way I view Will Howard is he's a more mobile uh, Kyle McCord, in my opinion. Didn't watch a
hmm
ton of Kansas State last year, but I've seen a few of their games.
hmm
So that was the only one that I was kind of like, well, okay, we'll see. But when you've got Judkins and Travion in the backfield, just run triple option.
right.
Howard's a mobile quarterback anyway, so just run triple option with those three, and good luck defense. All those talented guys on the outside, and you're not even going to use them this year. Just going to run triple option with those three. I think you'll be fine. So yeah, I'm with you though. Like if Ryan Day doesn't get it done, at minimum, like in the Big Ten this year, I don't know what else you say. Like I get the
Yeah,
whole
you
argument
really
about
can't say anything.
yeah, like I don't know, like I get the whole argument like you're going to fire a guy who goes 11-1 this season if that loss is to Michigan, let's just say
hmm
with this talent and what Michigan just went through this offseason with all of the turnover. Yeah, I think that's a fireable
Yeah.
offense at this point. So that's kind of a strange way to end our show here. But again, wanted to look at the Big Ten as a whole. We'll obviously dig more into this as the year goes along. We'll be back next week reacting to a couple more Michigan State basketball games, rivalry game this weekend in Ann Arbor, a game they should win. And then the game against Iowa is on Tuesday, I believe. We'll double check that, but probably back to our normal Wednesday show next week. So hopefully you guys can tune in then, and we'll see you next time.